They tell a story about me in my family that when I was a little tiny kid, my first trip on the highway with my family in the car, I popped my head out of the window and yelled at the top of my lungs, "Look out, world, here I come." They all laughed, thought it was cute, but I often feel that way today. I often wake up, get started with my day, walk into a classroom, walk in front of a group of people, sit down to write something, and feel that same rush of "Look out, world, here I come." I was born into what looked on the surface to be a really textbook perfect family. We lived in a nice house, we were middle class, I was largely raised in the Midwest. My father went out to work every day, we went to church 6 times a week, I went to good schools, made straight A's. But every night when I came home, I was coming home to a house with a family that was wildly dysfunctional. When I was 18, my father told me, women are for sex and cooking. And he wasn't trying to be mean. He wasn't trying to be mean-spirited or to embarrass me or to insult me. He just believed that women are for sex and cooking. So that has affected a lot of my life, even though I rejected it, even though I felt like that's not true, it still affected my life. So by the time I got to adulthood, I was really a disaster looking for a place to happen. And I got jobs and I did what many people do. But I also rather quickly, and certainly by the middle of my 20s, had decided to drop out and go to San Francisco and start to look into political action work that had to do with social change. It had a lot to do with how I felt about what had happened to me, but it also had a lot to do with what I saw in the rest of the society and how we tended not to want to talk about what was really going on, but we just wanted to pretend everything was okay. And I didn't feel that way, and I found other people who didn't feel that way either. It was a short hop from there to joining the prison abolition movement, because the prison abolition movement had to do with people, I found fairly quickly, who agreed with me that there were things that needed to be changed. And so I began to look at how easy it would be to wind up on the wrong side of that line and to be viewed as having a perspective that was dangerous when all you were about was just wanting to have a different world. So I wound up going into the prison abolition movement after that full-time for several years. It was a good period of time, but one of the things I learned was that was not enough, that most people were not interested in trying to change anything, let alone what was going on in the prisons. And I wound up, as a result, going into a period in my life when I was on welfare. And what that taught me was what it felt like to be incredibly poor. And in turn, that allowed me to get in touch with how materialistic we are as a society, how committed we are to having things, to believing that money is more important than life. And that allowed me to disconnect from that somewhat and look for new ways to feel engaged with life. And I did. When I realized that I needed a bachelor's degree in order to get a different job, that wasn't always necessary. I was nearly 40 years old by the time it dawned on me that I was never going to get off of welfare if I didn't have a degree. So I signed up for a bachelor's degree program that I could get as a non-traditional trajectory at Western Illinois University, and managed to complete a degree in a calendar year. It was unheard of. It was amazing. I made the newspapers. having done that, my momentum was up. I barreled immediately into grad school, and over the next 7 years, I just studied and learned and examined things I already knew a lot about. Knew a lot about inequality, knew a lot about injustice, knew a lot about race and racism, knew a lot about gender and sexuality, and just kept exploring and examining and broadening my understanding that, that the world we live in doesn't need to be the way it is. It was not intended to be the way it is, and it doesn't have to be that way. We can change it. There was a time in my life when I didn't expect to be 35. The fact that I have reached the age I am absolutely astounds me on a regular basis. But somewhere in the middle, I realized that my mission on earth is to grow spiritually and be useful. If I grow spiritually, I'll be useful. And if I don't grow spiritually, I won't be useful. And that unfolds in all kinds of ways. One way is that I've been teaching for 25 years. When I first went to grad school, it didn't occur to me I was going to teach. In fact, when they asked me, did I want to teach, I said, oh, no. I want to run something, preferably something international. That's where my head was at that time. I wanted to change the world, and I thought I was going to do it out there doing something huge, until I actually stood in a classroom and looked at the faces of the people in the classroom and realized that I was going to be able to tell them what I had learned. Not just what I had learned about sociology, not just what I had learned about politics, not just what I had learned about some theoretical perspective on the social life, but what I had learned in my life.
I met Professor Hensley last year, a year and a half ago. I took her Sociology 101 class because my current curriculum said I had to take a sociology class, and I was not excited about it just because I was thinking that I was going to get some, this is this is that, what do you think about it, you're wrong, and go about your way type of thing. And she did this thing where she had everybody write down on note cards, ask me any question you want me to answer, and I asked her a question about race. I'm coming from a really big interracial family, and she gave a 5-minute explanation of the answer to my question. And she's just the type of lady that says what she thinks, whatever she thinks, when she thinks it.
What we have to understand is that when we started this country, we had a white supremacist principle at the base of everything. We believed that people that look like me are just better than the entire rest of the human race. That sounds stupid to us, and yet that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about something predicated on the idea of skin tone, like telling somebody that they're special because their second toe is longer than their first toe, right?
I took her last year for sexuality class, and that was the first time I ever met her. And after the first class, I was absolutely in love with her. Every time she walked in the door, I get so excited just because she is the kind of woman that I hope to be when I'm her age.
She inspired me. She taught me what feminism was, something that helped me appreciate who I was as a female. You know, growing up, I was always told I was too opinionated, I was sassy, I had attitude, and I kind of felt like you're supposed to tone it down if you're a girl. You gotta tone it down a little bit. But when I met her, it was like, no, this is who you are. You're a powerful person. You can do whatever you want.
And then I began writing more. I've been writing since I was a child, but I began writing a blog on race. I've been writing that blog for 10 years. It's now been read in 187 countries, nearly 500,000 hits. I came up with the idea for my In Your Face Women project because when I think about oppression and submission, I have to think about what has happened to us as a human race in the way that we deal with women, with what we often call gender. And for the last 8 years, I've been teaching courses in gender and sexuality. which has really been an education for me because I've had to learn a lot that I really had not thought much about previously. So I went back and I found 366 stories, one for every day of an entire year in a leap year, where women who really lived somewhere in the world at some point in history, right up to the present, lived lives that we don't know women lived. So I created that project to start a conversation, to make it possible for women to know who they are, and to make it possible for men to know that they don't have to take care of women in the way that they've been taught they have to. My favorite story since I started that project came when I got an email from a woman in another country, a country where women are very heavily oppressed, where there's a lot of heavy social aggression toward women. And she wrote me this little email, and all it said was, "I found your blog on In Your Face Women. You give us hope." I never imagined that I would reach a point in my life where I would be operating on the level that I am in as many ways. Never occurred to me. Each thing that comes into my life, each opportunity I'm offered to reach out and connect and empower and help other people to transform this world and transform their world in some of the same ways that I have done with myself. I welcome those opportunities, and I welcome the opportunities to learn and grow myself by doing that, because it's an interactive process. This isn't something we need to do or could do from the top down. Who the people on the very top, the ones we think of as the decision makers, those aren't the ones that are going to make the world what it needs to be. We are. And we have to do that together. We can't do it alone. And none of us has the answers all by ourselves. But it can be done. And all I'm doing is putting my 2 cents out there and saying, I'm ready to try. Who wants to help? Who wants to join me? Who's got a 2 cents to add as well?